Hello, friends. Welcome back to Page Chewing, and welcome to the discussion for All the Pretty Horses. It's the first book in the Border trilogy, written by Cormac McCarthy. Very happy to be here with Chris and Varsha to be discussing this one. I didn't want to do the whole thing by myself, so I'm glad you guys were able to make it.
You already did. Yeehaw. You did 4 mini discussions that accompanied me on various walks over the past month or so, so that was very nice. And
cool.
Yeah, but it was quite nice to hear your thoughts as I was sort of trickling through it myself. And that's good.
Same. I may or may not have listened to some of them before I got to the corresponding section in the book, but yeah, I enjoyed those episodes.
I would expect
Why break the habit? Yeah.
Exactly. I knew bad things were coming with what is his name, Blevins, before they happened. I was prepared,
Jimmy.
So I guess it goes without saying this is going to be spoiler free or spoiler filled. Sorry.
Yeah.
So we will be spoiling everything.
Spoilers only, no non-spoilery talk allowed.
Although aside from a few deaths, I don't think it's the kind of book. Well, not that you can't spoil, but what makes the book good has nothing really to do with those events in some ways. Like, it's not like other books like, oh my, a big twist made it, or that event made it. It's much more of a book about feels and experiences and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's true. There's not a whole lot. It's mostly just the experience of the journey of John and Rollins.
Yeah.
So from the very first line in this book really just grabbed me. I don't know about you guys, but the first line was like, okay.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if I was gonna read it with you guys, but then I read the first line and I'm like, I kind of have to. I need to read this book. The thing about the candle and the way the flame moved and the quietude with which the book starts, which is very reminiscent of, I think, the other McCarthy books that we read, like The Road and the
Blood Meridian.
Yeah, that one also started with a very compelling beginning. Child of God also, I think, not quite the same way, but it did have that very, I want to call it McCarthy-esque quality to it that sucks you in. And yeah, this one kept me for the whole duration. And while we're on the subject of mildly comparing it to other McCarthy books that we read, there were some other things that stood out that he also did in the other books, like the descriptions of night and darkness, how the depth to those, that like just I think the character and quality of darkness that he describes, he did that a lot in The Road, and I think he did that to a certain extent in Blood Meridian too.
Yeah.
But I thought those were brilliant. Like those had me every time, and each of them felt different, and I guess they had some symbolic aspect to them too for whatever was happening at the moment. But yeah, but in and of themselves also they were just really brilliant. I think in The Road it was like within the first 2 chapters or first 2 sections where he did that, and that was one of the things that sucked me into The Road. Sorry, Steve, you were about to say something.
No, I was just saying it's a great observation. I didn't really relate it to the past books that we read of McCarthy, but he does it in a way, he describes things in a way with very few words.
Yeah. Very few words. That's very true.
Yeah. His writing really has character. You know, his choice of words, I think, especially, is quite unusual. When he often is describing things and kind of, it gives him his very own style. And I think I was saying to you very briefly when we were mentioning this a few weeks ago, it's much more like The Road, I think, than Blood Meridian, even though Blood Meridian is much more of a similar setting in a lot of ways. I think Blood Meridian kind of stands apart. That The Road kind of, maybe because it is like very much a journey, you know, in much the same way as The Road, kind of then going from Texas to down to Mexico, making their way through. You definitely get the sense of how his words and choice of words creates this very lived-in place. And it's the kind of place when you close the last page and you sit with the book for a while, it's the kind of book and the kind of place and setting that you yearn to be in again. I think afterwards, it's almost like going to visit a city that has like a hum to it. I often think about New York City, going to New York City, the metro of the hum of the city from underneath. You sort of want that after you leave New York City, I've often found, and it's something you sort of feel that vibration through your body. And I got a very similar feel off this book of yearning for mostly Mexico in this case, because a lot of the book is set there, and the kind of very different experiences they have of being away from home, but sort of at home in their own ways, especially John's character.
Yeah, that's a great example with New York City, because I always find books about New York City, I always crave more. When I'm done with it, I'm like, I need to go find another book set in New York City to make it up. I don't know. There's just something about the setting, I suppose. And yeah, I did want to keep going back to this book, not to find out what happens, but to just sort of live in that place for a little bit longer. Yeah.
I think what kind of adds to that is the environments become a character too, but also the characters within the environments and how they interact with the characters, how they interact with the environments and the settings. And the characters are there's not too many of them, but they're so defined. Even Blevins, that we don't get a ton of.
That's right.
His death was pretty kind of rough.
Yeah. I think it all kind of centers around, for me, around John Kid Cole. I don't know about you, but I just found him one of the most likable characters to read, even, which is quite unusual because he's such a young man. He's not world weary. He doesn't have a strong sense of identity, I think, nearly at the start in terms of his life experience. But you get a really good sense of who he is and his kind of his value system. And when he speaks to those who are either older than him or around him, he kind of has an authority to him, and he was very nice to be around. So he meant the times that he was by himself and he kind of didn't have the other people around him, that it was still really easy to be in his company in around this very vast place and etc. that he was traveling around, and easy to root for then in some ways. And you knew you didn't really need other people. He was going to be single-minded enough, as was with Rollins or Blevins, or his attitude towards Blevins, etc. It was all very, kind of fit well with my view of people, I suppose.
He almost seems like he's almost out of place in this time period with the time period it's setting with kind of the changes in the country and the way that things are technology is advancing, and he seems like he's kind of a thing of the past, but he's still young. So he almost feels like he's out of place in some ways in this new world that he doesn't really want to be a part of. He wants to be a part of this older world, and he's kind of like out of time.
Yeah. Actually, to that, Steve, I don't know about you, but the location and the life reads a lot longer ago than, what is it, 1949 or something around that. Like it's almost like it's 50 years previous in some ways, because they're traveling. Like, there are allusions to modern technology and cars and that kind of stuff, but they spend an awful lot of time riding on horses. A lot of the way that they live their life seems to be much more of that time rather than now, and so it kind of harkens back a little bit to another style of living. But a lot of his ideals sort of fit with that older time, rather than, it's there's a gentlemanly or an honor to it that is probably, I suppose, very divested from Blood Meridian, which was very, cutthroat and that kind of stuff. It's kind of contrasts very strongly with that.
Yeah, it was really nice how everybody was willing to help them. Like, it was just a given that someone will be driving along this road, they'll just stop for you and take you to however far they are going if it's in the same direction, and then you get another ride on from there. Like, that's how he traveled to see his mother, right? And that, I found that very interesting, just how helpful people are and unafraid of strangers in that time and setting. And I don't know if that part of the world is still like that with regard to how helpful they are, but at least what is it, nearly 70 years ago, that seemed to be the case. Maybe, according to McCarthy. I don't know if he lived through that period, but and in Mexico too, there are people who just give them food and
That's
are
right.
helping them easily until, one of them's like, hey, how much for that boy? And I don't think they had their belongings stolen off of them. It's just they're like, you want to sell that boy to me? I'll give you good money. Uh,
Yeah, I did wonder about, was that hospitality or was that fear that the people were hoping to kind of win their favor to not be killed, or was that just genuine hospitality?
Interesting.
Yeah. They were traveling around, kind of looking for short-term work, of people. So they were trading in custom as much as they were trading in kind of anything else. They needed somewhere to crash or somewhere to work, and work they did in certain places, and they would be treated in kind in a lot of those ways. So I suppose it sort of went with the custom of the life they were living in some ways. Very reminiscent again of like John Steinbeck kind of books as well, and that kind of like Mice and Men, sort of a similar kind of ilk and feel of those people just traveling around from farm to farm trying to get work.
Yeah. I think at least in the first few instances where like people willingly fed them, it felt like hospitality, and we see that a little bit towards the end too, when all hell breaks loose, and then there's this one person who sends him food to take with him on his journey. Yeah, I think I want to read that as hospitality, if nothing else. Yeah.
But I would contrast that actually with the idea of possessions then, because an awful lot of the book, they are tied to either getting back what is theirs, which in this world is very, very little. It's literally a horse and a gun. Again, sort of, which makes it think back to another 50 years previously or so, is sort of that idea. But what is theirs, and people shouldn't have it or take it. And while there's a code and a gentlemanly sort of life that they're going to lead, if somebody interferes with those two things, that's not right, and they're even more willing to give up people than they are like their guns and their horse.
Yeah. Yeah, the horses especially, and I kind of, with the title of the book, you wonder what the meaning of the title is, but you pretty quickly learn how important horses are and the way that they're viewed in this world, and it's without one, you're unless you're traveling on another method, at least people in this part of the world they need horses for almost everything.
Yeah. Definitely. And it uses that archetype for John Kidd Cole in the fact that he gets on so well with horses, and kind of reminisce that kind of archetype of people that are kind and good. The animals are good people, that you see in plenty of literature and otherwise. So it's it also helps build the world a little bit in this kind of pre-Roman horses and a way the world. It kind of sets what civilization looks like in terms of like there's as many horses as there are people. That's what it felt like in a lot of cases in this book. And that could have been just his perception of the world and the way he's seen it, but it definitely felt like that.
Yeah, those sequences where he was training the horses, or like breaking them in, I think that's the word, where he whispers in their ear the whole, I guess, mythology, if you want to call it that he's the god of the horses, and they are listening to him, and he's there. It's almost like they are afraid to be listening to him and not be listening to him, which is true. Like if God started speaking in your ear, you're like, I feel like it could go both ways, right? So that whole scene felt very interesting to me, or that line of reasoning that he is their God and they will do whatever he tells them to do. That both shows how good he is with horses, but I think it just also might be metaphorical of something else, like man's relationship with God to a certain extent, maybe. But yeah, those scenes were also quite brilliant.
I don't think of it that way until you just mentioned it. It's very interesting. Because they are almost treated as mythological creatures. So
Yeah, there was some line about how he'd be good at, handling horses, even if they were in a world where there were no horses. I'm trying to find it, but it was a very interesting statement. Like, I think his friend was telling someone just how good Grady Cole is with horses, and it's like, yeah, if there were no horses in this world, he would still find a way to be good at handling them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about the relationship with the girl a little bit?
Sure.
I forget her name.
Alejandra, I think.
Alejandra. Yeah, right. And yeah, that whole section, it felt so epic. It didn't end well for them, but
So it's interesting because I think the initial stage when they were getting together, that whole stage where they were getting together, was actually some of the slowest parts of the book. I thought it faltered a little bit around that initial part of it, because it went from being about this kind of road movie and this relationship and about friendship between Rollins and then Blevins coming in what seems like a younger character, to being about him just kind of stalling for time. And I think part of that is because we're not sure that this is serious for him, if you know what I mean. This is a big thing. It's very much him passing through and that kind of feeling. For me, the book stalled at that stage. By the time it comes back around and the events actually happen towards the end of the book, you're absolutely right. Epic is a pretty good description of it, because it takes the book in a whole other direction and kind of shows the family unit outside of him and his friends, and the strong ties and that, and the events that happened then around their relationship, and actually how it shapes and morphs kind of going forward, exactly why it couldn't happen in the way that probably he wanted it to, and him showing his age at that stage. So I think it was in two parts for me. The first part is the bit where I kind of thought the book sagged a little bit, just very briefly, before it kind of picked up and they moved on, and then the end bit was just really satisfying.
Nice. I think it was maybe a little bit opposite for me. The parts with the nightly walks and everything, it just felt. I mean, I wanted to believe that this would end well for them. I had 0% confidence that it would, but just in those moments, I wanted to share in their joy and hope that it would end well for them. And it had this very neither of you has probably seen any Bollywood movies, but most of them are about disparate couples in
Right.
At least in the 90s when I was still watching those movies. Some rich guy and a poor girl, or vice versa. I think it's usually the other way around. Poor boy, very rich girl, and how they fight the odds to get together. And of course they have happy endings, because movies, we need
Well,
that.
they were probably singing while walking, holding hands as well. They
That's
were
true.
probably and
Yes.
dancing
Yes.
while they were going through. So yeah.
So those moonlit walks where they're like running off in the night and being happy together, and I guess the whole setting and the environment, it was just so beautiful. That was the epic feeling part of it.
Right. Okay.
And then there was, of course, the father finds out, and he still wants to go and do something to win her affection, and like win her back, thinks he can support her. Unlike the Bollywood movies, it does not end well for either of them. But I like that they had like that little moment of closure towards the end. And what she said then about how she wanted to be honest with her dad, and she did not think that he would stop loving her because of this, which, oh, that really broke me. Like, this shouldn't be one of the things that affection should be withheld based on, but it is in a lot of the world. It is. I know where I come from. It is. So it's, yeah, that bit hit home quite a lot.
I think that's what makes the whole storyline effective, though, is that we know it's probably not going to work out. Like, we don't really see a happy ending, but it's still just the journey to get to that point. And to come from these really different worlds, and everyone's telling him, hey, like, that is not a good, do not do that, because you're dishonoring her and her family and everything else. And So you have this kind of push and pull where they really like each other, but they know that it's wrong, and they know that it probably won't work out. And of course, when she gets to the train at the end and she leaves, and that was rough. That was just. But I think that's
But
what makes it, heartbreaking. Is you know it's coming, but you hope it doesn't.
yeah, but you can definitely see it from the family's point of view, insofar as like he is literally passing through this world. I don't think there's any really thought from him that he's going to stay in the one place and settle down roots there. So from their point of view, they probably have seen this many times, so to speak, and that you basically leave behind this both heartbroken, but somebody that has invested all the time and energy and love into a person that was never going to stick around or stay around. And so the family probably felt they needed to do something about that, for good or bad, in one way or the other, which sort of leads to this very, I don't know how to describe that section where he's locked up. It's sort of, it's not sad, it's not depressing, but it's sort of like, there's like he doesn't deserve this either. It's an injustice part of it, that you kind of want to see good things happen to him, and you're not really thinking about love interest at that stage. You're thinking about survival for him, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think in a way, because we talked earlier about him being someone who is kind of out of place in this period of time. That's also another kind of crossroads for him making that decision to choose, because he asks her to go with him and to go back to America, and they'll find a place to live, and he'll kind of live the same life he wants to live, and she goes and kind of almost goes her own path, but he still wants to live that life. He still wants to be in that world, and that world's ending in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So kind of another kind of fork in the road where he still chooses that. That's what he wants to do. That's what he wants to be. And I think him, at the end, where his good deeds come back to help him get out of the prison. I really like that he was, because you do these good things and it comes back to reward him later, because he, was trying to do the right things and was being honest.
Interesting kind of view of romance written by a man as well. Not that I read a lot of romance, but it almost is a pessimistic view of romance in a lot of ways. I think you can see a different kind of slant at it, and a practicality of why the romance can't work out. These promises made, this kind of honor that they're standing up, and to that end, I think the relationship and the conversations between John Kate Cole and, was it the mother, the grandmother? Those conversations were fabulous. I thought those scenes within the book are really, really strong, as they sort of talk about the different philosophies of the worlds that they kind of come from and live in, and how things are very different. I found that really, really interesting.
Yeah, I almost thought for some time that she is, like, in the act of protecting her, she is the one who is preventing her from living her best life. But then she also never, like, she still allows her to do what she wants to. She's a voice in her ear saying, this is not going to end well for you. But she doesn't, like, when he says, I'm going to go find her, she says, you're welcome to. But I don't think she will listen. She won't answer your calls. So it's not that she's actively enforcing anything, but she's just enough the voice of reason for both of them, that they have to think about what they're doing a little bit. But I don't think she was detracting the girl in any way. It was mostly the fact that her father stopped speaking to her that changed her mind. Which, yeah, I don't know. We don't follow her, so we don't know whether she'll win his affection back. Yeah. But to the subject of good people trying to do the right thing, there's also all these conversations that he and his friend have about the nature of God and whether they believe in him and what actions will lead to what consequences. That also was very reminiscent of The Road for me, where those brief exchanges during their quiet moments when they're like wondering at their place in the world. yeah, those were quite beautiful and very organic. They didn't feel like, someone was just sitting there and philosophizing. It's, hey, what do you think about that one thing? Like, do you do you think you go to heaven or hell, and so on. It was just very beautiful, unobtrusive conversations. Nothing in your face about them, but they were there to make you think.
Sometimes the answer was, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it still made you think, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think the conversations are very true to conversations between two young males. I mean, I would say Rollins and Cole are, their worldviews are actually quite different in a lot of ways. They don't believe in the honesty of people in the same way. They don't believe in what they should be doing. But as young men often do, they just kind of go with it through a forced sense of friendship and stuff. You can live your life and I'll be here beside you. We don't need to judge each other. It's not kind of anything set in stone. And I really liked their relationship between each other because it was non-judgmental. Like, Rollins would voice his displeasure with the decisions that were going there, but he also just went, well, it's just the way that'll be, and we'll see how it plays out and that kind of stuff. So I find that, like I say, very true to life, very true to young friendship and young male friendship, and the fact that it was more important that they had somebody else beside them all the way through the good and the bad, rather than just kind of like, I've fallen out with you now. This is just, this is not for me.
I think I liked that reunion a lot more than than Cole with Alejandra, because it almost felt like he left on a slightly bitter note, like having it. So we go back and forth a little bit, right, on whether Cole's activities with Alejandra were what was responsible for their current state. I think we're led to believe for a brief period that it was because of their association with Blevins that they got caught. And then we later find out that the policeman had been by before, but now that the father knew that he was involved with Alejandra, he called them back and said, hey, get this man out of my house. So we know that he's responsible for the really bad stuff to happen to Rollins, or like that Rollins might think that, at least. But then when they meet back, it's as if nothing happened later on, and that made me happy.
Yeah.
It's, and in that section there was, I love the transitions he does. They're very subtle, and I think quiet is the word I want to use. Like when in that scene where Rollins is being questioned, and he says he doesn't know, or he didn't do what they're asking him to claim that he did, and we ended that conversation, and there's no gap or no page break, nothing. But the next line is him being brought back and curling up like in the fetal position, and then he tells John to tell them what they want to hear. So bad things have happened between the two sentences that we aren't privy to, but I think just from his almost the surety with which he speaks to the policeman, switching to just tell them what they want to know, what they want you to say. I think that switch was very poignant. Like that said a lot more than maybe paragraphs of bad things happening to him would.
Yeah. Beautifully put, no? Yeah. And the book is full of subtlety in that way. I mean, don't have to have these big grandiose speeches in it. They have interesting conversations where people relate to each other, whether that's Rollins to Cole, whether that's the mother to Harry and Alejandra, and Cole as well. They have these kind of just conversations with each other. Nobody really loses their cool in any of it. It's just kind of a statement of place and where they are, and about the changing nature of society, I think, as well. Because I think, just to touch very briefly back on the conversation where the mum's trying to protect Alejandra, from making the same mistakes that it appears that she made, and using that experience. I think she doesn't also realize that the world is changing and that Alejandra had the opportunity to go to America. You know, in some ways, I don't think that would have been something that really would have crossed her mind in that way. But obviously, it never happened then, because I think mainly because of the promises that Alejandra made to her. So,
what were your both of your thoughts on Blevins? Because it's such that's like this unassuming. After they're caught and after they find out he killed someone, he's just like, yeah, I killed him. Like it's no big deal. Like it's just a Tuesday. You feel he's this character you feel for, but it's just he's frustrating. Like, what are you doing?
It'd be easy to say he's a simpleton, but he's not. He's just naive. You know, he doesn't. He lives for the moment. He sees everything very black and white. There are no grey. Like, that's my horse. That's my gun. I'm gonna go get them. Like, what's the problem here? That this is not a problem. But even I love the scene where the thunder and lightning are happening, and he strips naked. Like that's really funny, and he loses his horse and his gun and his clothes and everything. Like, I think it speaks an awful lot to who Blevins was as a character, in terms of like believing the superstition or believing the naivete of how he was going to live his life, and then kind of going. It was almost as if when he survived that, it was like, oh, things worked out well there. He lost his horse, lost his gun, lost his clothes, but you know, it could have been worse. You know, it's kind of this kind of thing. But I think you could feel with Rollins that he was going to lead to some trouble, because he wasn't part of their group or part of their thing where he was going to ask permission about or advice from anybody about what I should do. He was always going to do his own thing in that way, and it did prove out to be true. But you did feel a certain belonging to that character, especially because you felt like he did need some guidance and some protection.
Yeah, there's a very ominous quality to whenever they said we've not seen the last of him yet.
Yes.
And they said it twice, and both times they got into serious trouble over it. Yeah, he was very hard to like. I think he is young. I think there is that concession we can make for him, and he seems to have acquired some of his rebelliousness from maybe abuse as a child. I think that's implied to a certain extent, but I still found him very hard to like.
Yeah, I think to your point, Chris, about him needing guidance and someone to help him, he just seems very outmatched. Like he never stood a chance recently. I mean, I think when you first meet him, you know either he's going to get them killed or he's going to get himself killed. It was just inevitable. But I do think it was more impactful to have his death off the page than on the page. Just when you see them walking him over, all that was, I mean, rough.
Yeah.
It was also really powerful when he gave John the last of his money, because you know he's just been causing so much trouble for them. So up to this point, but then he handed them what he can. It was almost like trying to make up for getting them into trouble, I guess. I don't know if that was his thought process, but it felt like it a little bit.
Again, for him, I think that was all he had in the world. You know, that's the thing that he kept for himself, like the horse and the gun and that kind of stuff. That was his very, very strong lines in his life, that what he owned was his. And it was almost symbolic of saying, like, he was giving over all that he had to the one person who sort of believed in him. And kind of, it was kind of, you know, very touching, I think, in a way, especially because we knew what was going to happen. And then when we seen the way it's told us, it's, you know, you can't help but feel what a waste. And you get the sense, because even from the very first time I meet him, nobody believes his name's actually Jimmy Blevins. Like, what's your name? What's your real name? You know, and he's somebody without identity at the start, and he's also somebody that died without identity, because as Cole goes back and tries to find the people that he belonged to let them know what happened to him, he can't do it, and it also makes that part of his life sort of sad. Like, we don't know what kind of life he left behind. He might have left behind and had a much better life when he did. I think that's definitely a possibility here. As you say, sort of a history of abuse, but also you don't know. And it's sort of like, that must have happened quite a lot over the years, that people just disappeared and rode off and were never seen of again. And,
Mhm.
Yeah, and these kids are so young. They're, what, 15, 16 when they leave
Absolutely.
home without telling anyone. And yeah. And I think you mentioned this, Chris, during one of our off-screen conversations, but it was hard to keep remembering that, just how young they are. He was 30 something in my head for a lot of time, and every time someone asked them for their age, and like 16, I'm like, damn, that's and I had to think back to all the awful stuff that happened to them and rewire how that felt.
It's almost like a complete circle of life with it, because he leaves home when his dad dies, when he leaves home, and he kind of disappears off, and then obviously there's death happens while he's on the road, and when he comes back round, he's able to mourn the person that looked after them, etc. In a way, and again, a very touching scene. But it's almost like he's mourning everybody throughout that period in a respectful way, as kind of he left a boy and came back a man. Almost, it's very much that coming of age tale in a lot of ways, but not in the classic way that we normally see.
Yeah, and there's a mildly parenthetical quality to it too, right? Like the starts with the funeral, ends with the funeral, and we see how he's changed between the two.
I think another you mentioned about him, or Blevins handing over his money and all he had in the world. I think he knew, right, that this was the end for him.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was really
His luck had run out.
So well done.
And the effect that had on both of them, right? The both Rollins hated the guy, but he was really upset at how he died. And with John too, we see, I think when he talks to that pastor towards the end, who's his namesake, he's also, I think, feeling a lot of remorse, both for his, I guess, for how the kid died, and I think he feels like he could have done something to stop it, right? What happened to him, and also the fact that he killed a man when he was in captivity.
We mentioned the conversations that are had in the book, and how they're. And Varsha, I think you mentioned kind of reminded you of the conversations from something like The Road. It's very short and to the point, and it's not. They don't go on forever. I think that makes them more impactful. But the discussions that John has with Perez in the prison about the differences in different cultures, and the way that Americans, we value possessions differently, and we have the ability to look away from things we don't want to face, and they can't. They have to face the things that they don't want to face. They don't have a choice. That was probably some of my favorite conversations of the book. Just the kind of very, it kind of brings to light the differences in the experience. Even someone just not far away from where you are physically, how different your life experience is.
That's a great point. And the conversations also aren't, it's not just that they are short snippets, it's also that they are usually single sentence exchanges, right? That say a lot. It's not that one person's giving a speech that is a few paragraphs long, and it's just single line exchanges between them that build up to a lot.
And of course, if we talk about them in captivity, we also have to talk about the assassination attempt.
The
Petty
knife
goose
scene?
my boy. Yeah, the bit where he goes from a boy to a man in some ways, in a lot of ways, kind of maybe a bit on the nose in that regard, but at the same stage, it's the bit that kind of turns it from and makes him sort of capable, I think, of doing what happens next, which is kidnapping the sheriff and taking matters into his own hands, because he's a bit sort of more willing to just let life come to him at that stage, and he obviously takes the decision not to.
I think it's kind of a point of no return, right? Where you cross a certain line and you can never go back after something. I thought he had to defend himself, and I think what got to me was the aftermath when it was described how his blood, the blood on his clothes, how he felt heavy, how it was like sticking to him, and that kind of, I think that made the actual physical altercation had more weight, because you felt like you could feel the blood on yourself, and the smell, and the kind of, he just lays down like, I guess this is it. So
yeah,
that, I think the aftermath is actually more, kind of had more of an effect than the actual battle.
Yeah, but very vividly told. But again, compared to Blood Meridian, which had lots of those scenes in a lot of ways, a lot of the very violent scenes, it was not like Blood Meridian, in which it was painted sort of as good versus evil and that kind of stuff, like the work of the devil. This was very much about survival and about sort of fighting back and against an injustice that had happened to him. And so he was literally fighting for his survival at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It also preceded my favourite line in the entire book, when he did kidnap the sheriff and the men were chasing after him, and he said,
they must owe you money, or you must owe them
you
money.
must owe them money. They're chasing us so hard that you must owe them money. So they meant the bit where they actually came and caught up them and left him alone and took the sheriff with them, sort of make a lot of sense. I think without that line, I don't think it would have had as much impact, or otherwise, because he's obviously trying to stay awake and he can't, he passes out. But that's such a funny line, and that's so true. He must owe them money.
That was great. And I think both of you had mentioned earlier about how John, the character that he has, and I think that's exemplified in his discussion with the judge towards the end of the book, where he just is honest and tells him what happened and the story that he tells him. And I was waiting for the judge to be this, because of Blood Meridian, I was waiting for it to be something different, but it was just a judge. So.
No. Yeah, it's very much a testament to who he was. I think that scene. Enjoyed that conversation, because again, it was very like some of the other conversations where people were just stating things as they've seen them and how it happened, and there was no shouting or disappointment or anything. It was just, this is how it was, and the judge is a very reasonable character, I suppose, compared to Blood Meridian.
A little bit.
No toilet stalls.
Oh, Blood Meridian.
Yeah.
I need to give it another read. I know.
Me too, but not next week.
No. One of these sometime later, sometime this year maybe, but I'm trying to go through it slowly. But, and I think at the conclusion of this one, I think him choosing just to kind of go off and do his own thing is, again, he chooses that life versus maybe an easier path, doing something else, get a chance to get a job or to kind of settle down, but that's not the life that he wants. And in some way, it's inspiring for him to live the life he wants to live, but it's also, you fear for him, because you know that he's kind of a relic of a time that's about to end.
Which, this is a trilogy, right? Do you think we'll see some of that time ending and how he makes his way in the world through all of that?
I've heard that he is not in book 2, but we do see him again in book 3. I don't know in what capacity, but book 2 does sound pretty different than book 1.
Okay.
We'll see. Yeah. Yeah, but I do hear that. I've heard, that's just what I've heard. I haven't ever read the end of the book or anything in Russia. But, yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah. I was hoping you could tell me that you might have checked it out.
Oh, I read the blurb. I wasn't sure if you wanted to know. Yeah,
I was going to say,
is
this would
correct.
be very unlucky if you didn't know Varsha.
The second book has a new character, and the third book has both Cole and the new character that we meet in the second book. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Because I was curious about. I only read the blurb. I didn't read the last page or anything. But I was curious about where this would go because it felt very complete-y, this story. So I wasn't sure if it was 3 standalone set in a similar time or if it actually continues the story of this character.
We'll find out.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we're not big on star ratings or that sort of thing, but what did both of you think about this one generally?
Varsha star rates things all the time. I'm a little less influenced.
Yeah.
I
sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead. You've actually got a star rating, so you may as well start there.
Oh yeah, so I do star ratings to remind myself of how much I like the book, and this one I gave 5 stars.
Oh.
I think it sucked me in from the beginning, and except for Blood Meridian and Child of God. Okay, that's 2 out of 4 for me with McCarthy, but the ones I liked, I loved, and there's a sense of the world sort of falling away from you when you're in this book. It's like the rest of the world is muffled as you're reading that I felt, at least, with all the pretty horses. And it, like Chris said earlier, I wanted to live in that world, even though it's not a setting that I voluntarily choose to read. Yeah, I think I loved a lot about this book. 5 stars.
Oh.
Yeah. So without stars, what I can say is it's my favorite type of book in that the story or the plot or the book as you go through it kind of opens itself up to you a little bit. It kind of lets you in as a very just seeing the world through these couple of characters very slowly at the start, and then the rest of the story kind of opens up and lends itself to you to the point that by the time you get to the end of the book, you understand a lot about the world and about the people that are there, and for that reason, it's right up there with the best books I've read this year, and I've read a lot of very good books this year, but it's definitely in the conversation for those things. Could I recommend it to everybody? I think McCarthy as a writer, aside from The Road, I think The Road's very easy to recommend to anybody. I mightn't give it to my mum, but I do think my mum would read and enjoy The Road. I'm not so sure she would get as much out of this necessarily. I think McCarthy is the type of person that you have to accept a sort of cynical view of the world, and there's going to be violence in his world. There's going to be kind of characters that you like and dislike in it, and sort of know what you're getting into to a certain degree. But I think if somebody had said, God, I really liked, I'm trying to think of another book that's like McCarthy, but I can't really off the top of my head. But if they kind of give me the idea that they like films that are in that sense like dramas, it's more of a, if you were to think of it as a film, and it was a film, but I haven't seen it, just as a drama where there are kind of events to happen, but there's no like thrill to it. There's no thing. It's just about existing and living with people and telling you about their life. This is a book that does this very well because its use of language, its use of character, and its use of place is exemplary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is probably one of the more accessible McCarthy books, that ones we've read. I think the stories, if you can get into a Western, I think you can probably sink your teeth into it.
Yeah, it's a Western from 1949. It's strange in that way, but it
does seem,
it is very Westernish. Yeah,
it does seem strange. It feels like it's a lot older than that, or the time period seems like it should be like 1920, and even before like early 1900s. But I think the story is pretty related. I think all the aspects are pretty relatable. I think the road is another one that I think most people would enjoy, but I think this one would be kind of on the easier side to get into for most people, just because it's kind of like a slice of life. It has a little bit of everything. It's not too violent. So I think it's probably one of my favorite, but maybe the top 10 for me.
Wow.
Yeah, I really liked it. And I just picked it up off the shelf just on a whim at the used bookstore. So we're done pretty much.
I often say this, Steve, about when you ask people what's your favorite books of all time, and they give you a list of books, and there are certain books that people will tell you that you go, well, I can see that that's an acceptable answer to that question because that book has thematic depth, it's well written, all of those kind of things, and I could definitely see somebody saying this is my favorite book of all time, and I go like that's a fairly solid answer to that question. Like this book has a lot going for it, and I can see why you would fall in love with lots of aspects of this book for sure.
And I know the three of us have, and Jared too, have talked a lot about classics and how it's ruined our experience in some ways. Reading and kind of compared it to other things, but this is another example of even just with the first line, like we talked about at the beginning, is you can tell the quality of craft is just it's a different level than most things that we read, and it just makes you happy just to see something that well crafted and that well put together. And not that I can't enjoy something that isn't on this level, but obviously I do. But it's just different. It's just different when you read something that's this well put together and this well crafted.
They call it classics for a reason, aren't they? So it's like one of those things, regardless of whether it was 300 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is. There are books, and especially writers, I think in general, who come along that kind of have a craft that sits outside of telling a good yarn or good story that has that. And I think it was A.P. Canavan. You say this, it sort of reaffirms the idea that prose and form and structure and all has value in terms of telling a story. It's not just about telling me an interesting story with a plot twist there, a resolution there, and a finish at the end. There is more about literary value than just those things, and that's a very good example of it.
Definitely. Anything else you either of you can think of?
Not for me, no. I'm very happy to have read this. I wouldn't have read this probably for another while until you put it up there, Steve. So thank you for suggesting, and like I say, thank you for the week by week commentary as well.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if anyone would listen, but I'm glad somebody's listening. But I appreciate it. Cool. But until next time, whatever that is, I'm sure very soon. But until then, Varsha, where can people find you?
On the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, which I currently use mostly to post episodes from the various podcasts that we record, speculative speculations among them, and some of the Malazan discussions. What's that?
Oh, you don't post conversations from speculations.
That's true.
That's a lie.
I have scheduled them. I have scheduled 2 for next week, so some are coming. Cloud Atlas is coming. Speculative speculations. We recorded that back in January.
Oh shit, it has been that long, huh? Wow.
Lots of good stuff to get to, though.
Yeah, that's true.
And Chris, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on a lot of those same discussions that Varsha was talking about, their respective speculations, the Oscar Project, all of the side hustles that happen in Page Turn, which I'm just now I'm calling the home of the podcast and read along. That seems to be apt for where we are at with that. And you can also find me in the Chronicle of Chris YouTube channel when I can stick some thoughts together there very occasionally.
Well, thank you both again for this. It's been a lot of. It's always great to talk to you guys. But thanks again for joining me on this one.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Of course, always. So until next time, we'll talk to everyone very soon.